Hello, mystical, magical people. Welcome back to the Oracle Parlor podcast. I am so excited today because we also have a mystical, magical person in the parlor today. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, everyone. First of all, to Jenny, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited. My name is Emily Dexter. My generalized title that I have struggled for years to come up with is basically a spiritual translator, at the root of it, because I think that really encompasses all of the myriad of things that I do across many different spaces and places. But essentially, I have been a professional psychic. Well, I've been psychic my whole life, but I've been professionally psychic for more than 15 years. I do psychic work. I'm also an activator. I do a lot of channeled history where I will either travel to places around the world or stay home and talk to people who lived in the ancient past, channel them in and get their stories and kind of recover that for them, as well as I do a lot of like healing work, spirit guide work, past life work, those types of things. Um, that's like a little bit of like a very broad scope of all of the messiness that is me.
Yes, no, I love that. I love this title that you've made for yourself and how perfectly it encompasses the entire vibe of everything that you do. Because, for anyone who may not know in the audience, all psychics have a different way of reading and perceiving, and they have different things that they may call kind of like their honed skill that they're really focused on and really spend a lot of like time and effort like making that shine. And so, you already kind of mentioned it a little bit in your intro, and I just think it's so amazing because it's like not often you hear people say that they, talk with people in the past and communicate,
Yeah.
with people who have passed, but also who have these experiences in history and bringing that to the forefront and diving deeper into that. So I'm curious, how would you say that you perceive or receive intuitive information through your psychic senses? And for anyone who doesn't know, a lot of times they're referred to as the clairs. So what would you say tends to kind of come up for you as you're reading?
Yeah, so I am very intuitive with my clairs overall. So for anyone listening, there's eight clair senses, and they're kind of just going off of your basic senses, right? So see stuff, hear stuff, smell stuff, just know stuff, taste stuff, emotionally feel, physically feel, tangibly feel, um, and oh, there's one other one, I think. But oh, did I say just know stuff? Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know. When you first started out, I was like, whatever. But there's eight of them. I think when we first start out, we really like to put our own stuff into boxes in like a really profound way because it really helps us to feel comfortable and it helps us to
Mhm.
understand that we can pull off of different boxes to do different things. I'm
Mhm.
at the point in my own psychic experience where mine is kind of a messiness conglomerate of all of the different senses. It's kind of the difference between like playing a scale on the piano to playing a song. I'm in the song
Mhm.
phase. So a lot of times I will see things. I do have a pretty significant clairvoyance, both with my physical eyes and with my mind's eye. Physical eyes, I see more of like energetic frequencies, the way the energy comes off of everything, kind of all the time. Occasionally some beings as well, but more in my mind's eye, very heavily in that one. I have a lot of claircognizance, so the just knowing sense is pretty intense for me a lot of the time, and that's typically validated with a lot of clairaudience, mostly with my own spirit guides. I let them have most of the clairaudience space for me because I know them the best as far as beings that exist out there. If I hear them talk in my ears, I'm like, oh, okay, it's my guides most likely there. I do have a decent amount of clairsentience. Usually that is a more empathetic clairsentience, though, where if
Mhm.
someone's feeling something or someone getting sick, or there's some part of someone's body that's hurting, if I'm doing a scan on them, etc., I will kind of feel that in my own being and be like, oh, there's this thing going on and can kind of channel in from there. Uh, those are kind of my strongest ones. My clairtangency is literally so dumb because it's the only thing that it does for me is whenever I touch things, I get like a small snippet about how that thing was made. And it's like not even helpful. It's just
It's
like a
like, okay,
tiny
cool.
little
Yeah.
thing. It's like, oh, the artist actually wanted this cup to be blue. And I'm like, well, that's so
Great.
great.
Yeah, fantastic. Not helpful, but cool, I guess.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And occasionally too, I'll get the other senses to kind of pop up, but those are
Mhm.
always it's a little bit more random when that happens. So I always pay extra attention if those come in.
Yes. No, I love that. And
Mm.
I love that you're talking about how, we as humans definitely feel comfortable in boxes with titles and categorizing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's definitely where all of us begin. But then, like you're saying, you get to this state where you eventually start kind of blending and they all kind of become one. And you don't really
Hmm.
even think about it anymore because it's like you'll be in the middle of it and it's like, oh, you see it, you hear it, you know it, and it's just like, oh, there's like three or four different Claires popping off at once. And it all
Hmm.
kind of builds the frame for this beautiful picture that's like unfurling, this story that's being told through your
Yeah.
psychic senses.
I also think that there's an important distinction too between like what exactly you're looking at in the energetic
Mhm.
information. Because like yes, it's the way that you're perceiving that energetic information. But if a guide or a ghost wants to send it via image versus via sound, there's also an
Yes.
element of that. So I think a lot of times, especially when people are really struggling with their psychic abilities and connecting to those psychic abilities, they're like, oh, I can't see anything. But even though that's my strongest sense, and I'll be like, well, did you ask them to send it via sight? Because sometimes they're probably yelling at you
Yes.
and you aren't hearing it because it's not your strongest. So
Yep.
I do think it's also like a give both sides kind of situation too.
Absolutely. And that's something that I also like to tell people is like, hey, if it didn't make sense, or you felt like it didn't come through, ask for it in a specific way. Ask for it to present in a way that you know you'll be able to understand clearer because how you perceive things and prefer to perceive things may not be how it was sent initially. And that
Absolutely.
may be where the confusion comes in. Because, like you're saying, maybe they're sending you a sound and you're like, I didn't even register it, you know?
Hmm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
I love that. So I'm actually curious, because as you've said, you've been psychic your whole life, and there was a certain point where you made this transition to be doing this work full time. But I'm curious, like, how did you discover that you were psychic? Like, did you know what it meant to be psychic, or, was that something you were initially open to? Like, I'd love to know your personal story.
Yeah, so it's less of me discovering I was psychic and more of me discovering other people weren't. That was more of what ended up happening. And not saying no one is not psychic. Everyone has psychic abilities, but I'm
Yes.
just saying as a kid, so I came in very, very connected, very, very woken up, very, very psychic
Mm.
at the core of it. I had a kind of alternative sort of childhood in a lot of ways. I live in Lake Tahoe and I was born and raised here in a very tiny little wood cabin, but it was like right on the shores of the lake. So we had no television. We didn't really do anything inside. It was kind of outside all the time, whether it was wintertime skiing or outside in the summer at the beach or whatever it was. So for me, I had this very naturally connected to the outside type of
Mm.
childhood. So a lot of the spiritual stuff came really, really simply. It just kind of came in being that way. And then, as I got older in school, I, started noticing things like, wow, your imaginary friend sounds nice. Mine's this like old man by the water tank who like yells at me. Like that's cool. Um, I think it was about 7 or 8 when I started being like, I don't think everybody else, can hear all these other people talking when they walk into a room of adults. I think maybe not everyone can do that. Like that's kind of key. And I do have like very early memories of watching like Disney movies or like, fantasy movies, whatever it is, and being like, yeah, that is how it is. And like
Yeah.
being very like, that's a true thing, like thinking it was depicted that way. And then as we go through childhood, we really get ingrained into like imagination equaling false or like not
Yeah.
true, isn't the case, by the way. Just going to throw that out there with some
Yes.
nuance, of course. Um, but when I started realizing that was the narrative that was happening, I was like, but those things happen to me. This is weird. So I brought it to my mom, who is an absolutely wonderful, precious human being. I love her so dearly. But she's also a Catholic from the Midwest. So like didn't have a whole lot
Yeah.
of depth of understanding when I like walk in and I'm
Mhm.
like, hey mom, I see all these things. These things, weird things happen to me. And I was 8. So, like, how good did I explain that? Probably horribly. So, her just being a good supportive parent was just kind of like, yeah, okay, well, go outside and play. Like, just kind of like brush it off. And it was one of those moments where I remember being like, oh, my mom doesn't know what's going on. Oh, she's God. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing here. Um, and
Yeah.
so then I started gradually, especially as I got older and got into more middle school style spaces, realizing just how different I felt and was. For
Mm.
context, I was also just like a really awkward person. I'm almost 6 foot tall and I've been this way since I was like sixth grade. So like it's just generally like a kind of a sore thumb there too. Um, but I got really, self-conscious and I really tried to shut it down. It
Mm.
didn't work. It just made me afraid of it, which is kind of the classic thing with psychic
Yeah.
abilities.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Hmm.
actually work. You're still very
Hmm.
psychic. You're just now
Yeah.
scared about it. Um,
Exactly. Yes.
yeah. And so that's what ended up happening. And I was, even when I was like 15 years old, I was still like doing readings for people. Like my friends,
Amazing.
whatever, would be like, well, what do you think about that? Will you ask like whatever's going on? Like, could you tell me there? I'm like, yeah, well, your people say this, like whatever. I was still doing that very often, but I was still just as scared of it as before.
Mm,
Um, and I found myself kind of slipping more into kind of mostly I did a lot of psychedelics and did a lot of other types of drugs during that time period of high school because I was just trying to
mm.
feel normal. And with other people being on those, I would be normal.
Yeah.
My psychic weird stuff was accepted because everyone was fine. So with that, I kind of lost a lot of my natural intuition too, and ended up in
Mm,
like a really yucky, abusive relationship into my early 20s. And when you're in those types of spaces, you're in fight or flight the whole time. So you can't really be magical or psychic or tuned in because you're just in such deep grounded earth space, that there's not a lot of other space for other things. But when I got out of that, I was kind of like, hey, I'm done being afraid. Like I've run out of things to be afraid of. I just went through like the worst experience of all time.
yeah.
So I'm done with that. Like I don't need to be afraid anymore. And I really started out on like my reawakening and reconnection of my
Mm,
abilities of being like, hey, like I want these. So that's where my approach comes from now. Is like I wanted it to be fun and easy, and I had to find a way to reawaken it that was kind of working around some of my trauma while
yeah.
also healing some of my trauma and also connecting to these things that had literally been talking to me since I was like remember. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's more of that kind of story.
That's a roller coaster of a story. And
Yeah.
it's amazing because I feel like a lot of people who are currently doing this kind of work seem to have somewhat similar like story beats where it's like, oh, okay, you know, had it as a kid, got scared at some point, shut it down, and then got to a point where they're like, okay, I'm ready. And it's interesting because for you, you really did go through, the darkest part, the what do they call it in storytelling? The when the hero's journey they go into
Oh
like the
yeah.
dark cave and they come
Mhm.
out completely reborn and really sounds like you had that hero's journey in this really difficult way that you really overcame that and you were able to take those traumatic things and process them and through it sounds like this practice heal those things that had happened, which is not easy to do. And I definitely want listeners to recognize that these things can go hand in hand in this really beautiful way where, you know, even if you have trauma and anxiety and stress and even fear of these things, it's not like you can't do this kind of work. Because that was like one of my fears when I was like starting to get back into this because I had a very similar journey where, as a kid, I had a lot of experiences. And then one day I just shut it all down. And like you said, shutting it down doesn't actually turn it off. It just kind of, it's like trying to bottle up an explosion. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's still going
Uh-huh.
to do what it's going to do. But yeah, there was this fear that I personally had of I don't know if I could do this work professionally because I have anxiety, because I have fear that stems from these traumas. But I've met so many people, so many people, so many beautiful people like yourself who have gone through these really dark times, who had these different anxieties and stressors in their life, and they're still able to do this work and they're still able to go forward and help people. So I really admire that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think so a couple different beats on just kind of that point. I think on one side of it, in a lot of ways experiencing some type of narcissistic connection, which mine obviously was, and many people's are, isn't inherently kind of an activator in general because you see like the opposite of your nature coming at you and taking, and then when they're gone, the amount that you want to use and burn brightly and connect and go deep is so powerful and profound. So
Yeah.
anyone who has gone through that and is now going through a spiritual space, I just wanted to like point that out of like that is where that, power I think comes from in a lot of ways. I think that's kind of like the purpose of some of this stuff to happen too, which I say that with air quotes because I don't want to ever say that like "Oh, what you went through is so good for you." Because like, no,
Yeah,
it
no.
sucks. Let's
Yeah.
be real. Like that's not fun. Like
Yes,
no one
yes.
likes that. And that's I never want to like minimize that experience in the
Of
slightest. But
course.
but that being said, I do think that there's a lot of power there for everybody. I think there's a lot of that
Yes.
connection happening right now, which I truly love. What I will say is yes, I have used a lot of these abilities to heal from tons of that experience. But I will challenge the idea that you said, like that stuff is hard. I actually come at that with that's a limiting belief. It does not have to be. There's no obligation of that being challenging. And I
Hmm.
think that was the number one thing that I came up against when I was going through my own spiritual awakening. So much of the narrative, both in like the mental health communities and like the coaching healing communities, as well
Hmm.
as the like psychic magical witchy communities, is like, oh, but it's going to be challenging, but it'll be worth it. It'll be so hard to overcome, but you can do it. And don't get me wrong, there are things that are hard and challenging, but
Yeah.
I don't think that they have to be. I don't think that that is a
Hmm.
requirement. I don't think that the struggle is inherently
Hmm.
necessary in order to overcome these things.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
the more
Yes.
that I can simplify those things or make those things fun or gamify any of that, that was always my goal with it because I
I
got
love
so
that.
triggered by that narrative. And I think that's part of that deeply informs my spiritual practice now in a lot of ways because I always come at it with like, well, let's just make it simple or like it could be fun that way or, that kind of thing. And I think that is where a lot of strength that people don't understand there is strength in can come from. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
There's a saying that I really like that paranormal investigators Greg and Dana Newkirk always say that I often reference in my podcast, which is curiosity over fear. And this has that
Mhm.
same kind of vibe where it's like, okay, yes, and how can we take this, like you said, how can we take this and gamify it? How can we kind of shed some light on it in a different way, in a new perspective, where it doesn't have to feel so heavy?
Yeah. I also think that, I mean, this is just speaking to the spiritual community. Everyone who's in this has come across this, but so many things are gate kept for literally no reason. In the spiritual, like so many things. And if we can just simplify it, make it fun, like then everybody's psychic. And isn't that the goal? Like that's what we want to do, and everyone's healed. So I
Yes.
think there's also like a little note of rebellion in that for me, also to be like, okay, well, if we can make this fun and just be like, well, what about try it this way? And like not gatekeep and make it very accessible for as many people as possible.
Yes.
Like I think that's also where that kind of comes in.
Yes, I love that because essentially what you're doing is you're kind of challenging the like the system and parameters that are kind of have been set in this like really weird way, unspoken way,
Mhm.
and you're challenging that and being like, okay, let's break that down though. Let's look at this from a different perspective. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And I'll also say too, because you mentioned anxiety, because I know people get very anxious with some of this stuff. And I
Yeah.
would also like challenge that and say that I think that's where a lot of our power actually comes from.
Mm,
As like a hashtag anxious girly, like
mm.
I've been under that space forever. But if you think about anxiety at its core level, anxiety stems from our ability to model the future, which is that not just being intuitive? Like that's
Mhm.
literally what it is we see a future coming in, then we're scared of it because we don't know what it's going to do. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know how to do that. So our body responds by giving us more energy. And because it
Yes.
doesn't feel comfortable for us because we're reacting in a way from a future that we don't want to happen. So we're trying to avoid. So that feels very discomforting in our body. Um, Oftentimes we're like, oh man, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. When at the core, anxiety is literally just power that your body is being given energetically to move you around a future you don't want. So if you treat it like that with a
Mm.
lot of this psychic ability stuff, magic stuff, you can kind of be like, oh, I'm getting anxious. Well, if I can transmute that into power or transmute that into more energy or like use that as a tool to move around some of these things, it's kind of a lot of times proof that you are tapping into the future better because you're seeing it and you're like not saying that the future you're seeing is inevitable, but you're actively modeling that all the time for yourself. You're actively modeling intuition all the time. So if you have a lot of anxiety, a lot of times it's because you're actively tuning in. And if you can lean more into let's tune in and practice this in a psychic ability way, the anxiety is naturally going to decrease because you're using that power it's creating.
Yes, and I think that statement is so true when it comes to specifically that anxiety around this kind of stuff. Because
Hmm.
unfortunately, there is, uh, thanks popular media, there is a lot of fear around spirits and
Yeah.
ghosts and jumping to the conclusion of it's a demon. And I definitely would say that was one of my biggest fears when I was shutting everything down was I was raised Catholic. I was
Mhm.
raised on ghost shows and don't get me wrong, I love paranormal shows and I love my paranormal investigator friends. But like when you're growing up and, ingesting this kind of media, it can instill that anxious fear within you that,
Yeah.
oh man, this kind of work could open bad doors. And so I think the way that you're talking about this, having this like anxiety around this kind of work, and then again, kind of like that quote of curiosity over fear, being like, no, 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 how can we rein that energy that's raising up in our body and making us feel a little panicked and a little like, oh my gosh, and how can we like kind of recenter that and redirect it in a way that's not harmful to ourselves is really
Mhm.
interesting. I love that.
Yeah. And you can use it like, oh, I'm anxious. Well, I'm going to tune in even deeper. I'm going to see other things and like use that as like a fuel to go deeper into your psychic stuff. Just something to play with. And it's just something I encourage people to think about in a little different way instead of feeling like they have to avoid the anxiety or eliminate the anxiety before they tune in or feel confident here. I don't think that's a requirement.
Yeah.
Also, on the note of like those fear things that we're all taught, yeah, the popular media sucks. They have taught us horrible things in
Yes.
regards to psychic stuff. Um, but they've also, taught us some fun things too.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
one of my favorite quotes of all time, I actually have it tattooed on me, is fairy tales don't tell children that dragons exist. Children already know dragons exist. Fairy tales tell children that the dragons can be killed. It's J.K. Chesterton quote.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, I do not advocate for killing dragons. Don't touch your
You're
dragons.
like, no,
They're
hold on.
cooked. But what essentially it means at the core of it is
Yes.
like oftentimes when we're kids, we build the fear up so much bigger, right? It's this huge thing, but we have these stories, we have these things like you can conquer those fears. Now, when we're adults and we enter into these spiritual spaces, we still have those child fears there.
Yeah.
But at least in my personal experience with all the many people I've worked with, oftentimes when you come face to face now with these scary spirits or things that you open, you're just like, ew, could you like
Yes.
go away? Like you like,
Yes.
don't come in here. You're not allowed in this space anymore. Where little
Exactly.
kid you, where the fear stems from, was like petrified,
Yes.
you know?
Absolutely. That's so true to my own personal story too. Because like as a kid, shadow figures with like glowing eyes scared the crap out of me. Nowadays, I see it and I'm just like, what are you doing here? Why are you in
Yeah,
my space? Like, what's going on? Like, it's just like, oh
exactly.
my gosh, yeah. And so, like, for
Yeah.
anybody who's listening, who maybe still be in that liminal space of, trying to open themselves a little bit more and not to have that fear. Here you have two people who do this professionally saying that's normal. It's
Hmm.
normal to go through that process. It's normal to have that moment, but eventually, the more you do this kind of work, the more that you release those anxieties and those fears, the easier it becomes to take a breath and be like, oh, hold on. Let me ask a
Yeah.
question here. Let me think about this a little differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at the root of it, like you are way more powerful than anything that could
Mm-hmm.
catch you in this. Like you are
Yes.
plugged into earth because you're literally in a human body. That is so innately powerful. There's so much strength and magic in that. Like you can pull from the earth. Most of these things cannot
Yes.
do. So they
Yes.
come in at like you could literally like kamehameha, like Care Bear energy blast something out the door. I don't recommend doing that without asking questions, but you
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
could do that because you have the access to the energy that they don't. Like at the core level, they kind of have to play by your rules and not the other way around, which be
exactly.
respectful. Many of these things were beings first, like let's honor them. But also, like you're the one that gets to make the rules.
Yes, yes. And I have an episode on the podcast where I talk about this for anyone who hasn't listened to it yet. Boundaries with spirits. You absolutely are allowed to say no, just like with a living person,
Oh
just
my
like with
gosh,
spirits and
yes.
entities. Yes, you are allowed to say, hey, this is making me uncomfortable. Just like, we, as when we were younger, we tried to shut that stuff down so hardcore. But now we're both at this point where it sounds like we know that we can say, oh, hey, no, I don't have the time or
Mhm.
energy right now. Maybe later. Let me investigate this later. I'm
Oh
doing
yeah.
movie night.
Yeah, I have office hours. If you come outside
Yes,
of my office hours, the answer is always no. Like that's not happening unless it's like one of
exactly.
my guide team or something. Like my own spirit guides have they can ping me whenever. But if it's like a random ghost, what are you doing here? Like no.
Yes.
A deity wants to pop in right now? No, you don't get my attention. That's what's happening.
Yes, I love that. And I love that you have that self-respect, as you go into this work. So, you were talking a little bit about your experience and um how you kind of realized like, oh, no one else is having these experiences. Oh, this is me. I'm curious, do you remember like was there a specific memory or turning point or moment where it just kind of clicked? There was that aha of like, oh, they aren't seeing this or hearing this or whatever that was.
I don't think there was one specific one. It was kind of a series of different things that happened.
Mm,
I think partly because I kept trying to play. make believe air quotes games with people with other, and they would be like, and then this happens. I'm like, but that's not what that thing is saying. Like, but the like
Mm.
the person I'm playing with, the being the fairy, oftentimes because it was the nature, we were outside in the trees or whatever,
Yeah.
or the elemental. I'm like, but that's not what they're saying they want to do. And they're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? We're making up this game as we go. And so I think that was like part of it for me too, where it kept happening, where I was like, talking to these beings, like, are we not doing the same thing? Is this seems very odd. Also, I was getting a lot of kind of anxious pings and energy because I was feeling a lot of the feelings of the adults around me. Like they would have a feeling or they would be about to say something and I'd know what they'd say and I'd say it first. And they would look at me like, what are you like? What is this? And I'd be like, well, you were just about to say it. So I just said it anyway. I'm like, this is,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing. Or like, or I would see like their guides attached to them or their past loved ones attached to them. There was definitely moments when, I would know someone died before they did. I'd be like, yep, they came by. Like, that was a thing. And I think mostly it was a mix of media and enough people being like, oh, should be for me to be
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. And then like kind of that self-awareness that like gradually comes around that age
Yeah.
anyway, where you look around and you're like, oh, I'm an individual person. Like, I think that genuinely happens. I will say though that those click moments where like things do click and there in that sense it wasn't the best thing for me to realize, oh wait, I'm doing this weird, but those are continual things that happen throughout your
Yeah.
journey, and
Oh,
those are some of
yes.
my all-time favorite. It's like those moments where you're like, oh, the universe is playing chess. I get it. Like, this moved around, or when I was very first met one of my guides, like for a while I thought every house I moved into was haunted. I thought they were, and then I wasn't getting any ghosts. I was like, where, but there's no ghosts in here, what's happening? And then I was like, wait a second, am I haunted? And then that was like the first time I like really spoke to a spirit guide fully, because she was like,
Mm.
basically like, yeah, like kind of, that's like what's happening.
It's like,
But
welcome to
it's a
the
very similar
party.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You figured it
right?
out. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah,
definitely.
exactly.
I
So,
love that it was less of like the light switch and more like the light dimmer,
mhm.
where it's like slowly
Yes.
over time, yes, the light
Yeah.
bulb's getting brighter and it's like, oh, because like, yeah, even when I think back on like when it kind of hit me, it was definitely like so many experiences that I just shrugged off as like, no, that couldn't be. No, 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 no. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden it was like, wait a minute.
Mhm.
But it
Mhm.
does take time to kind of sometimes reach that realization and to realize that a lot of the times we told ourselves it was something else, or we, like we were discussing earlier, we may have been raised to write off these experiences as just our imagination, as
Mhm.
nothing, as make believe. But,
Mhm.
as we're sitting here talking, obviously that's not always the case.
Yeah, I really wish we would teach children. So I think we have multiple levels to our imagination, and I really wish
Yes.
that's the way it was presented in society, because we do have our imagination that is the like fake and pretend stuff. That
Yeah.
stuff usually kind of sits more at the front of your head. It's for you to just kind of model like, oh, what am I going to eat for lunch tomorrow? Do I want this, this? You're like kind of imagining fake scenario. What am I going to say to my crush? Like how am I going
Yeah.
to handle this conflict? Like that is modeling a lot of fake or pretend situations. And then I think the next level goes a little bit more into your channeling. That's when you hit like daydream space, which is
Hmm.
inherently a lot of times you're channeling in, if not the entire thing you're tapping into, components are being channeled into your space. That's where we can access more channeling. And if we actually understood that we could direct that, that would actually be a really core and beautiful way for us to navigate our life space, which is just this, it's just doing magic stuff. And then like the deeper one is like going to basically astral levels of space where you're actually things.
Yes.
But the thing is they all feel like imagination. So they all
Yes.
kind of fall into that bucket. So whenever someone comes up to me and they're like, oh, this happens or whatever, but is it just my imagination? I'm always like, yeah, it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Good
Yes.
job. Just,
I do the same thing. Yes, when people ask me, okay, but how do I know it's my imagination? I go, it is your imagination.
mm-hmm.
Surprise, it is, because like the imagination is the foundation. You can kind of think of it as like that is the foundation for all of our psychic senses. It's what we
Yeah.
build on top of. It is what helps us to perceive. It is a part of that. So yes, of course it's going to feel similar. And it takes time to really feel how they're subtly on a really, really, really subtle energetic level, maybe have a slightly different vibe or feel than like what you're talking about, where it's like imagining yourself going to eat breakfast for, the day and how that pops into your imagination versus how when you're tapping in and connecting with a spirit, with a land spirit, with the fae, or whatever that may be.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely like subtle things there. It's like one is shallow versus one is deeper, which is one is deepest. Like it's like a
Yeah.
feel to the energy that comes in. And also, because it is your imagination, how cool is that? Every one of you is good at it. You're good at
Yes,
it. Congratulations. You already are good, already
exactly.
there. And that's really special. Like once you use it as an empowering tool.
Yes. And I love that earlier in this episode, you even said, everybody has psychic
Yes.
ability. Everybody has psychic senses. And because everybody has imagination to some level, and we're not talking, I want to be clear for anybody who's listening and might not know, we're not talking about seeing it in your mind's eye visually,
No.
because some people can't. Aphantasia exists. Some
Hmm.
people just cannot visualize in their mind's eye. But we're talking about the imagination, It's kind of like how you may be able to hear a song in your head, even though there's no song playing. You may be able to taste what a lemon would taste like, even though you're not actually biting into one. It's the senses activating in these ways that are in imagination, but then, like you said, taking it to the next level and going
Yeah.
a little deeper and kind of like a psychic cake,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. I know whenever I say like visualize, I'm always like, I always mean see,
Yes.
sense, hear, feel, know, taste, or smell. Like that's what I'm saying with it. That being said, with those aphantasia folks,
Yes.
that is something that can be changed. And I have many times made it so, yeah,
Really?
I've worked with a lot of people and we've overcome their
Oh
aphantasia.
my gosh, that's
Hmm.
amazing. I've actually been doing research on aphantasia because you've actually inspired me and I had people, yeah, so I'll tell you this story.
Okay.
So I've had people reach out to me because I teach classes and stuff, and I had people reach out to me and as an artist who used to work in animation,
Hmm.
people would be like, okay, but how do I visualize this if I can't even visualize? And so they sent me on this journey of researching aphantasia. And then I
Hmm.
remember coming across your videos. This was like maybe like a year or two ago, where I heard
Hmm.
you say, when I say visualize, I say, I mean, hear, sense, think, feel, know, like your list. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh. And that just really lit up for me. And so when I teach classes and I do guided meditations, I say that, I quote that because I'm like, this is how we
Oh,
do it. But I never
yay.
knew that like you could work with people with aphantasia and kind of like it sounds like you're kind of slowly taking the bricks down almost.
Mhm. Yeah. I
That's so
mean,
cool.
truly, it is a core tenet of my personal belief journey that like literally nothing is impossible. So especially every time we talk about one of our limitations as like this concrete thing, I'm always like, ooh, well, can we fix it? Like, can we do
Yes,
stuff with it? Can we make
yes.
things changes? Especially something like that, or even oftentimes allergies are just as transmutable too, because we just have like a limiting belief structure or a block structure. Maybe past life stuff came into it and really jammed that up. Or maybe,
Mm,
we can work with your higher self and be like, hey, so why is this blocked up? Is there a purpose for that? Can we achieve that purpose? So then we can have this unblocked. Like, there's a lot of different ways to kind of approach a lot of these different things that
yeah.
not 100% of the time am I going to say it's always going to be 100% perfect because it requires a lot of investigation work and energy work and those types of things, but they're definitely workable.
Yes, yes. And I want to make clear for anybody who's listening that it is also not a substitute for like professional medical care.
Oh,
But
never.
yes,
Oh my
no,
God,
never.
no.
Yes. And I know you agree with that, but I had to add the asterisk in case somebody
Oh
who's
my
listening
gosh.
is like, I can magically, magic away my al-" I'm like, no, 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 hold on. It is both. But
Yeah.
it's so true though, because like when I had my surgery for endometriosis, I was
Mm,
actually recovering and taking Reiki classes, and that's a lot of energy work. And my teacher, one, they taught me about, you can have anxiety and you can still do this work because they were someone who was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety. And they really inspired me. But two, they were also working with me to be like, okay, yes, you have this like chronic illness and condition, but how can we like flow those energies so it's a little more at ease? How can we start
mm,
thinking of it, like you were saying, not seeing it so cement where it's like, yes, okay, this is the framework I've been given, but what can I do within that to maybe shift things a little bit so it's more easeful for me rather than
yeah.
feeling completely like blocked? Because that
Yeah.
mental state, especially if you have a chronic illness or disability, of getting into this depressive thinking of like things will never change, but being like, okay, this is what I have. How can I do things for me that's going to make me feel fulfilled or more joyous within the
Mhm.
framework? Do you know what I mean? Like stuff like
Yeah. Oh my
that.
gosh, absolutely. I mean, we have a body consciousness and we have a soul consciousness, right? So we have to heal it on both levels. We have to heal it with the
Yes.
body, which is
Yes.
the physical medicine, the mental health support, those types of things. Energy work can help, but it is still healing it on a body
Yes.
level. And then the soul level, and that's your energy work, your
Yeah.
meditation, your flow, your techniques, you're talking to your guides, whatever. And both have to hold hands in order for
Yes.
things to happen. So,
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny because like I finally learned how to do grounding work when I was going through my like post-op recovery. And oh my
hmm
gosh, what a difference it made to be able to ground all of those emotions and sensations in the energy body that I was like holding on to while my
yeah.
physical body was trying to process, you know? So,
hmm
but I
Yeah.
love that. I love that you say it's like hand holding the two, the spiritual
Yeah.
body and the physical body. Yes. I love
hmm
that.
Yeah. That's why there's a place for all of it.
Yes.
By all means, like spirituality is never an excuse to not do traditional medical care, ever,
Thank you.
ever.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So I'm curious, now that we've kind of talked a little bit about like your core beliefs and the way that you do things and how you kind of came to this awareness, that dimming light slowly getting brighter, at what point did you say, I'd like to do this full time. I want to do this professionally. I want to help others and teach others.
Yeah. So, really, like I said, in high school, I was doing like trades for reads and
Hmm.
things of that nature. So that's kind of where I always say, like, that's kind of where it started because that's really where I draw a lot of experiences of like my first channelings and things from for other people was in that time period. But basically, I don't even know how old I was, 21, maybe. I started really being like, well, I know I'm good at these things, these couple senses that even though I was still in my trauma healing phase and I was still trying to wake it all up, I was like, well, I can do oracle readings for you or tarot readings for you. That's super easy. I've done that for a while now, and I can do XYZ things. So I really started doing just kind of on the side, mostly for my friends or people my friends would refer or those types of things that would come in. I also actually worked as a phone psychic for a hot minute during
Amazing.
that time. Yeah, don't recommend it. Just
No,
so
yeah.
you're aware. If anyone's like, "Ooh, can I do that?" You can. Do I think you should? I do not. Um, but I did do that a little bit in my early 20s, just on the side because I was working in like a professional, very high level corporate sort of world at the same time. And then the universe worked the way that it does. And
As
I
it
was in a
does.
space where I was really manifesting a lot of my own personal growth and business growth and those types of things. And I got laid off. And
Ain't that the
I was
way?
like, mm-hmm. Well, the thing with that too is I got laid off at the exact date that I was flying out to go to a basically retreat spiritually. And I was like, okay, that's my
Whoa.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was May 1st. I will never forget it because they're like, you're laid
Wow.
off like effective May 1st. And I was like, all right, that's literally the day I fly to this. Fantastic. Um, and went to my parents. I had basically a month of time and I went to my parents' house first, basically on the day I got laid off. And I was like, so guess I do this now, like all the time. Like for like this is just what I do. Yeah, and that was in 2018, I think. I can't remember, but yeah, 2018. So it's been a while of me doing it full time, but I've done it part time since I was like 15, basically.
That's
Mhm.
amazing. That's really cool that you were already kind of like doing this to some extent. I had a very similar experience where like I had been re telling kids fortunes, as I called it, when I was a kid
Mhm.
in like junior high, 14, 13 years old. I had a deck of regular playing cards and I'd be like, okay, yeah, let me tell you who you're going to go to the dance with. And
Mhm.
then, scaring all the kids when things started happening in weird ways.
Mhm.
And so having that kind of like already embedded know-how of how to like work with people and being able to already have that understanding and then the universe coming in and just kind of shoving you in the right direction there.
Yeah, that is a classic. It's a classic me move too, where the universe is like, guess what? You do this now. And I'm like, okay, I guess I do this now. That has happened so many times throughout my life that now at this point I just try things. And if it doesn't work, I'm like, well, cool, that's fine. I try another thing.
Ah, yeah.
Get really, really comfortable with failure really, really, really fast. Um,
Oh man, I envy that because like I tell you, like the universe came in and kind of gave me the same sort of shove, and boy, did I fight it. It was hard. It was so
yeah.
painful. But learning to go with the flow in that way has definitely been something I've been trying to work on. And it sounds like you were kind of put in that situation and you were like, okay, I'm gonna flow. I'm just gonna, you know.
Yeah, I think the first time I really discovered that, speaking of like light switch moments,
Yeah.
there was a time I think I was 16 or 17, because I think I was in junior year. And I had tried a bunch of different things to do a bunch of different stuff, like, classic things like get a real relationship or like, get this thing to work or whatever whatever it was. I forget what it was. And I realized that if I tried to do it the way everyone else was doing it, it would backfire on me and I would completely fail. But if I did it completely alternatively and super duper different, then it would work. And so I
Mm.
started like, oh, okay. So I would see what everyone else is doing and be like, cool, not going to do that. How do I do it my way? And then go this way. And that just is what worked with my energy. So whenever I call them God smacks, where you get like God smacks or a
Yeah.
lovely I'll censor for the podcast, but heck freaking no moment. Is also what I'll call it when you hit this wall of like, oh heck freaking no, I cannot go this way anymore.
Yeah.
Um, Whenever I hit those, it was always very much like that same kind of moment of being like, that's what everyone else is obviously doing, got to pivot over here. And so that's kind of where the flow came in for me on a personal level.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I also, I realized pretty early on in my work here that we actually have our definitions of success and failure swapped. So, when we think about, I've had to explain the concept of failure to so many spirit guides. I cannot tell you how many spirit guides get so confused
Yeah.
because they're like, I don't know why, she won't do this thing. I'm like, well, she's afraid of failure. And they're like, what is that? I don't know what that means. And I'm
Totally
like,
makes sense.
huh? Because like to them,
Mhm.
they're like, no, you're supposed
Yeah.
to do this thing. It's supposed to not work out so that you go this way, which is the whole reason I planned it for you. And then you go over here, and that's going to make you
Yeah.
do this thing over. Like that's to them, you are being incredibly
Yeah.
successful on your path by this thing not working. Like that is genuinely how they view success.
Yep.
So we're sitting here with our definition swapped because we feel oftentimes that like failure is inevitable and it's going to break and this isn't going to work. And your guides are like, great, keep going doing that thing some more. That's what we're actually looking for. So then we think that success is like everything working out perfectly or, working out in this way, in the way we expected, whatever it is. And that's oftentimes what our guides are like, no, don't do that. Like that's great. It worked till this point. Now we got to fail over here. But they don't
Mhm.
understand it as failure. And so I realized very early on, if I like stop framing it as that's even a possibility, because it's genuinely not,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Yep.
Then it's a lot easier to navigate whatever comes up.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that because, like, I recently, earlier this year, had that kind of moment with my guides where I was doing this work, I was doing this spell crafting, I was manifesting, I did all this, I put so much energy into it, and the thing didn't play out, and I saw it as a failure, and I was so
Hmm.
upset, and I went to my guides and I was like, "What the heck?" And they were like,
Hmm.
"You did it," and I was like, "No, no, I didn't. Like, the thing didn't happen." And they're like, "Okay, but what did you get out of this? What did you learn from this? What came of this?" Now what
Hmm.
direction do you think you're going? Oh, well, you don't know, and that's fine. And I was just like, oh. But they were just
Hmm.
so like nonchalant about it. And at the time I was so mad. I was like, what do you mean? Like,
Hmm.
why are you not more upset about this? And they're like, because you did it. Hooray. And I was just like, what the? So like
Hmm.
you framing it in this way, it's just like so on point, it like almost hurts. And I'm like, oof, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It was a brutal one for me too. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm doing it backwards.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. And I feel like society, especially like Western society, has such strict ideas of successes and failures and what makes someone successful and everything else is a failure outside of that. And so I so appreciate you bringing that into the discussion of, we may see it as one way, but in reality, our guide is sitting there cheering us on, being like, "Yeah, you did it! You failed, air
Hmm.
quotes, failed, keep
Right?
going."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
They're celebrating and we're like in misery.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
But it makes
exactly.
sense. Yeah.
Hmm. And some of those are big things. Like, don't get me wrong. Like,
Oh yeah.
I've lost lots of money and lots of things that have like happened, and like those things on a real world level are like scary, right?
Yeah.
We're like, oh my gosh, I have no savings now, and I just threw it
Yeah.
all away. What is this? And your guides are like, uh-huh.
Good
Like,
job. Keep going.
that
Yeah.
way, please.
Hmm.
Now
Yeah.
you can only go in this direction that I've been trying to get you to go in for the last 6 months. Now you're going that way. Let's go. So just to validate the human side of it too. It can still be human scary while being
Yes.
energy good.
Yes, exactly. It's a part of the normal human experience that we're meant to have, but it can definitely
Yeah.
help to kind of like loosen that mindset a little bit.
Hmm.
So, I'm curious, many of us who have psychic experiences can be scared or freaked out by it at first, which is what we've discussed, and it's a total normal response. And as we were just saying, that is what it is to be human. But what do you have in as far as suggestions for folks who are navigating their own experiences and, trying to, we've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but seeing it from that different perspective, releasing those different kinds of fears, and not holding it within that kind of mindset that they may have already put it in within that box.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. First and foremost, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's like no rules at all.
Yes,
Like
yes.
my personal rules are try not to hurt anybody and do my best to be a good person. But the root of it is like the universe doesn't even operate off of our own sense of morality. So you can have rules for yourself, but other people cannot bestow them upon you.
Ugh,
Like they
so
just
true. So true.
I think the root of it there is like the more you can look at something and be like, oh, I have to do it this way and ask yourself why, the better you're going to be at this. Because even if you have a why of why you have to do it that way and that why makes sense for you and feels aligned, rock on, go that way. But if you find the why doesn't make sense to you or doesn't feel aligned, then do it different.
Yeah.
Yeah. There really is not
Yeah.
any rule in that capacity. Also a constant reminder that it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun.
Yes.
Like this is literally superpowers. That's a fun
Yeah.
thing. Like it's supposed to be fun. And if it stops feeling fun or starts feeling like a chore and it doesn't feel like a exciting challenge level of chore, but like oh, I gotta whatever, or this isn't working and doesn't feel like again, the curiosity there of like why, or go
Yeah.
back and like I brainstorm new things to do all the time. And I've done this my entire life and I'll still be like, wonder if I could do that. I don't know. I'll brainstorm and see how I could figure it out and like go through and talk to my guides and get the channeling to come in and experience that way. Other things with that, blind trust is never a requirement, which
Yeah.
I think is like a big thing that people, I think it's an internalized like religious doctrine situation that ends up happening
Mm-hmm.
with us, where especially those were raised in monotheistic religions,
Yes.
um, specifically the Western ones. It's oftentimes like, well, you have to trust God with all of your whatever. And I think that is BS. I don't think you have to do that at all. Like my guides are my best friends, and still they'll tell me something. I'll be like, yeah, you got to prove it to me though. And I'll just like go on, and that's a totally reasonable interaction to have.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
they're the magical ones who know the heck what you're doing. Like make them do more work. Like that's fine. Or if you get a big ping or something, and you're like, was it a ping? Was it not a ping? Ask. Like
Yeah.
letting that be that space where you never have to reach a point where you just blindly trust everything you're given, and that shouldn't be the goal.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times that's what, especially when you come in and you're kind of a newbie in this space, that is the goal. And it's like, why? Well, if there's no
Yeah.
reason. Like it leads it more to like feeling like a magical scavenger hunt as opposed to like this like ultimate power that you're connecting with. Like, I would rather go on a magical scavenger hunt.
Yes.
Um, you know? So um yeah, that's some of I mean, there's more. I could go on
Oh
forever,
gosh,
but this is
yeah,
like
I
four
bet.
tenets.
No, I love that, and I love that throughout our entire conversation, everything that you've been talking about, even though we're talking about spiritual practices and psychic ideas and paranormal, you are always speaking from childlike wonder and curiosity and making it fun. And this is something that I have been going on a journey on for myself personally this last year. And it's been so resonant. So like the fact that this keeps coming up in our conversation, I'm just like sitting here like snapping away, like, yes, this is exactly what I feel like. Not only do I need this, but I feel like this is something that a lot of us need to kind of hear is, because a lot of my clients who are practitioners, who are intuitives, I feel like one of the reoccurring things that keeps coming up is forgetting that this is fun. This can be
Mhm.
fun. This can be play. This can be, the
Yeah, and
scavenger hunt.
at the root of it, spirit is so unserious. Like it's so unserious. The amount of like absolutely ridiculous things that have happened to me through spirituality that is just silly and so weird. But now I'm so much deeper connected because of that. Like, the list is innumerable. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I have so many sagas about it. I have a hamster right over here named Hermes that caused a whole bunch of drama. Not a real one. He's fake.
Yeah.
But hold on, context. Um, caused a whole bunch of drama there. But like the other side, all the stuff you're connecting with isn't serious either. Yes, there's more serious beings and there's more serious issues and there's things like that, but it doesn't have to be. And the way that
Yeah.
you approach that doesn't have to be that either. I know too, and especially for the people who are really getting into practicing, you don't have to know everything about everything right off the bat. You don't have to drink from a fire hose to be good at this immediately. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of stuff, especially in this day and age on the internet, like because so much information is like readily available and so many people have opinions on how you should do the XYZ thing or what you
Mhm.
should do now or whatever, people end up getting really bogged down almost immediately after their spiritual awakening because all of a sudden they're like, here's a million different systems you can use just for divination alone. Like there's so
Yeah.
many different things. And I really always want to encourage like fun is also a guide. Like what feels the
Yeah.
most fun to dive into that. And then if 3 weeks from now it doesn't feel fun to do, cool, put that on the back burner for a second and dive into something else. Like all of it's spiritual development, even if
Yeah.
it's not like you get to expert level here and then start a new path and get to expert level there. Like you can pivot and flow between them, literally guided by fun, and you're going to get so much more out of it than you would otherwise.
Yes, absolutely. I 1,000% agree. And I feel like a lot of that also comes from like even the wording that we use when we say we're doing spiritual work, we're doing spell work, because we're tacking on the word work to the end of it. And again, coming back to the Western social,
Hmm.
this idea of what it means to work, what it means to succeed and fail around work. It definitely feels like it then becomes kind of like a trap of putting ourselves in this box of it has to look like and feel like work, but it can be play.
Hmm. Yeah.
Reframing it in that way, I think is so important. And, speaking of art and creativity and thinking in this different way, the last thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up here is, I know that you're also a writer, you've been a
Yeah.
ghostwriter, and you're currently in the process of finding agents for the books that you're working on. We had an animation artist and gallery artist and astrologer, Terry, on the podcast previously, who kind of shared their process of blending astrological magic in her art. But I'm curious, do you have any magical, psychic, mystical practices that you like to do when you're getting into the creative headspace of writing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I absolutely do. So yeah, I am an author. I've written other books. I actually do have an agent. She's amazing. Her name's Kelly. And by the time this airs, most likely I'll have news about where my next book is landing in the publishing world. So that's very exciting as well.
Congrats!
Thank you. Really, really thrilled about it. Super stoked. It's a historical fantasy about a woman named Locusta. She was a poisoner in ancient Rome. Like she actually lived, like she existed. She actually killed multiple emperors. She poisoned multiple emperors, but no
Oh,
one knows anything about her. We get like 3 lines about her in Tacitus and 3 lines in Suetonius, and like that's it. And it's usually just like, woman be bad. She make
I
poison, you know.
mean, the usual for that. Yeah.
Right. So when I first heard about her, I was like, hold on, we need to work that back. And I actually tapped in and channeled her. Sorry if you could hear that. That was thunder. So
Oh, how cool.
pretty cool validation just then.
Yes.
But I actually tapped in and channeled her and was like, hey, like, I'm really intrigued by this. What's your story? And that's where this book kind of came from, is my channeling with
Mm,
her. So, with my writing in particular, because I write fiction predominantly, I have some nonfiction too, but predominantly write fiction. I treat it like a channeling exercise first and foremost. So the same way I would if I was to go into like a deep meditation sort of space, I would get into writing and I go, okay, who's coming forward? Who's a character in this book? What do you want to say? And I really
mm.
approach it in a those beings exist out there in the universe because they do, and they want and whether it's existed in history here or is a alien with blue skin and purple eyes from a different planet, whatever it is, they exist out there. So tapping in and being like, hey, like I have this idea for the story. This didn't come from just me and considering it an external idea. I'm just translating it. Again, spiritual translator. And who wants to be in it? Whose story, who is in this story, who wants to be a part of this journey? And then I speak to them like they're people, because they are. and channel that in and kind of write and create in that way. I'm also just a chaotic soul at heart. So oftentimes my writing process consists of like lay upside down for 5 minutes first and see what new ideas flow to me because I'm looking upside down.
Yes.
Or, I will, ask my guides and be like, okay, what do I need to do first before I'm allowed to write right now? Like, what is it that I need to clear out of the space? And sometimes it will be like do some like divination work for myself. Sometimes I'll have to pull some blocks for myself, which I pull blocks fairly easily, so it doesn't take very long. Or sometimes it'll be like, well, I need to tell you this gossip. And I'll be like, okay, cool. Let's talk about that first. Let's lay that out. So I do very much treat it kind of chaotically and intuitively in that sense.
I love that though. Like, because, as an artist, it sometimes does come through in a chaotic way.
Oh yeah.
It's just sort of like, oh, and there it is. I'm, off doing dishes, and all of a sudden it's like, now I have to draw this. I need to drop everything and I need to go. And I feel like
Mhm.
it's kind of has that similar vibe where you're actively tapping in, but you don't ever really know what's going to come forward. And that can lead you into these inspiring moments of like, okay, now I have the thing that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's
I will
amazing.
also invite like my characters or even my guides and stuff to just do like random mundane things with me and I'll ask them their opinions on that to actually get to know them. So
Oh,
like
how cool.
recently like I've been watching just like crappy reality TV because I just needed to like tune out because the earth is heavy. Um so I'm just doing that and like having different beings sit down and watch episodes with me and like give me opinions on like the drama. And it's just
Yes.
such a joy, right? It's like so
Yeah.
much fun. But that's like another way of just, again, that like drop everything moments is like, yeah,
Yes.
but also now I know them more. And so I can pull more in this. And I'm like, oh, I can totally
Yes.
picture this scene now of you doing this XYZ thing because I know your personality.
Yeah, you're
Um,
getting to know them on this like more casual but also deeper level, which is really fun. And again,
yeah,
going back to like having fun, playing in the space,
I know.
anyone else listening to that would be like, "Oh, that sounds like an imaginary friend." And it's like, yes, we can play in that space with other spirits and other entities in this way that's like, "Hey, come watch TV with me and then like let's spill the tea on like this reality TV show that we're watching."
100%. There's a fairy. He lives in my kitchen. His name is Cinnamon. He is the coolest person I've ever met.
Oh
He
my
is
gosh.
not a guide in any sense or capacity, but he gives me all sorts of wisdom out of nowhere that is so silly. Just it's like, okay, well, here's a cookie. Have a nice day, Cinnamon. Like that's about the extent of the relationship, and I
Oh
love
my
him.
gosh.
He's
I
great.
love that so much. That warms my heart. Like that is so precious.
Oh my gosh, he's a hoot. Yeah, there's so many stories about him. One time I was leaving and I was like, "Good night, Cinnamon." He's like, "Good night, not Cinnamon." And I was like, "Whoa, come out. Do you not know my name?" And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Do you want to know my name?" And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Okay."
Just
And
being
so
honest.
that's he just calls me not Cinnamon. He also calls my husband not Cinnamon, and he calls my children not Cinnamons, multiple. So
Oh
it's
my
like,
goodness. Precious. I love that so much.
but it's just, I mean, that's what I mean. Like spirits is it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
it's
Sometimes they're
easy.
just silly little guys?
Yeah.
Oh, I love
I have
that
so
so
many
much.
stories about him that are just ridiculous. Oh my,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for sharing all of the stories that you have today, both
Mhm.
your views on things and your personal experiences. And I know we could just keep talking about art, creativity, inspiration, writing, and tapping in. Like that's a whole other thing. But I
Yeah.
needed to hear your magical practices before we wrapped up. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming into the parlor today. I am sure our listeners are eating this up, just waiting to hear where they can find you and what things you have coming up.
Yeah, well, first of all, again, thank you for having me. This was super duper fun. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm on all the places doing all the things, to be totally honest. So, my website is emilydexterpsychic.com. And that has all of I do offer readings. I call soul readings. They are booked like 6, 7 months out. So just know that when you go in. But I do offer those. I also have digital courses that you can take. Those are also listed on my site. Everything from having to understanding how you can actually have a conversation with the universe and create kind of your own secret language with the universe to like how to activate and pull your own blocks and those types of things. I do offer mentorships. I have a beginner mentorship and a advanced mentorship as well. Those only open for enrollment a couple times a year, so you can always just hop on my email list, and you'll get to know that. Also on my email list every week, I send you a weekly energy forecast just so you know what's going to happen. So if you want those delivered to you, my email list is the place to go for that. Um, and on all of social media, my handle is Liker of Words. That is where I am on all the things. I'm most active on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, so that's where you're going to find most of the resources. And on YouTube, I do have all of my travel vlogs, which is traveling as a psychic. So we recently got back from Egypt, and so I have like site by site different videos of like the different spiritual energies there, what you can use those for, like
How
what I
cool.
experienced there, that kind of thing. So if you want to check those out, that is there. Also, if you do want to travel with me, we do host activated retreats all over the world. By the time this airs, we might still have some spots on Thailand in the fall, but we also have some space open for Peru. And by the time this airs, I can announce this. I'm like, wait a second, I haven't announced it yet, but because it's airing after we record it, we also maybe will have spaces for Greece next summer as well. So if you want to come
Amazing.
and do magic and talk to deities and learn about astrology and all sorts of stuff, come adventure with us. It is the most fun things I have ever done in my entire life. So
It sounds absolutely fun, and it's on my list of things that I've always wanted to do. I always see you posting these different like travels and people connecting in with the energies, and I'm like, oh, what perfect vacation to go to these like beautiful historic sites and then also tap into the energies with other people who are doing that and like sharing. Like that sounds so cool. Everything that you do has just been so beautiful. I so sincerely appreciate your offerings that you have for people that are both free on social media as well as the things that you sell, like your classes and stuff. And your view and your take on everything has been really helpful for me personally, which is why I was so excited to have you on the podcast to share
you
that with everyone here. So that way, you can continue to shine your light that you have been doing. So thank you so much again for coming on to the show. And for anybody who's listening, of course, all of Emily's information will be in the description. So definitely make sure to check it out. Check out all those links, give Emily a follow, as well as my personal links will be there for Fantasma Witch. If you're new to the podcast, I'm on Fantasma Witch, TikTok, Instagram. Um, my website is the same thing. So definitely read the description, get all the info there. And thank you so much again, Emily, for being here today. It has been such a pleasure.
you are so, so, so welcome. Thank you again for having me. It was a great time.